It's time to begin this evening. If you would be turning in your Bibles to Proverbs chapter 17. Proverbs chapter 17. We'll be starting there shortly. Continuing our classes and overcoming sin. To give a brief rundown again of what we've covered so far is the actual nature of sin itself. The overcoming of sin is necessary. We went into the flesh, the lust of the flesh, pride of life, anger, worry, covetousness. Last week we covered hypocrisy, and this evening we're going to cover gossip. My favorite topic to talk about one-on-one. Not seriously. Although we often see that happen. Let's go to God in prayer before we start. Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this time we have to set aside in the middle of the week to come to you as a gathering, to study with one another, to sing songs into thy precious and holy name, and to be edified by those words of the songs that have been put together by people that have studied your word and have thought about you and contemplated life and death and the hereafter and the way that we should be. We're thankful for those men that composed the words in such a way that we can bring them to you in a pleasing manner. And I ask you to help us to present them that way. Help us to give you honor and glory in all that we do and all things. We ask you to be with us tonight as we look into thy word and study the topic of gossip and how it is a sin that defiles the man and how we can overcome it. We're thankful that you have guided us in these things that we study about and present them in such a way that we know that there is sin that brings us, or separates us from you, and that we also can come to you and ask for forgiveness, and that we can also study your word and actually overcome the trials before us on a daily basis. We ask you to be at the classes throughout the building. Those we know of that are studying in your name, help all gain knowledge. They may be better people, and us as well. We ask you to be with us the remainder of this service tonight. Guide us through this life. And help us be mindful of your Son, all that he went through for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I had you all turn to the wrong verse. I had the wrong page opened. Mark that, because we'll be there in a little bit. All right? But we need to back up a little bit and go into James. James chapter 3. In James chapter 3, starting in verse 6, it reads, "And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defiles the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell." And in verse 7, he talks about every beast's tongue is tamed, but not ours. In verse 8, "But the tongue can no man tame. It is unruly evil, full of deadly poison." And then down in James chapter 3 and verse 10, we see that we should not have good things and bad things come out of the same mouth. So thinking about that, and if you don't have one at home, you've no doubt used one where you take your cup and you put it up in this dispenser and maybe the refrigerator or a soda fountain to get a soda to drink. What would you think if you put it up in there one time and you got water, and the next time you went over to that machine and you put that cup in there and you got mud, or you got, name your passion, or name your mix-up, you wouldn't be real happy about it, would you? We expect good things to come out of that machine. We expect, if I put my cup under the water, I expect water to come out. Well, God expects that out of our mouth. He expects our mouths to have good things come out of it, not bad things. And I will never forget my parents instilling in us kids, if you don't have something good to say about someone, don't say anything. And there's so much wisdom in that, and we'll see that come out in the lesson tonight. That very fact as well. So what is gossip? What is gossip? I'm asking you.
I think, in a very real sense, it's when you're talking about someone, but you're saying something that you wouldn't necessarily say to that person's face. Hey, I heard that so-and-so did this, and did you hear what happened? And it's usually prefaced with those sorts of words or those sorts of qualifiers to it, where it's something that's probably not a story that needs repeating. Something that we end up saying, and like I said, that we wouldn't say necessarily to that person that we're talking about.
More than likely, it's good or bad.
Not usually good.
Not usually good. Greg?
I'll define it by the 3 rules that somebody told me once that gossip, which is it true? Does the person that you're saying it to need to hear it? Because sometimes it might be true, but they need to hear it. And thirdly, is it beneficial for them to hear it? Is it something that benefits them in some way? And maybe you shouldn't say it, and maybe it's gossip.
Yeah. And so we see here by the authors, I'm going to bring up some of the authors' discussion too. Thus, gossip is idle talk. That's what we've talked about so far. Private affairs, usually, of other people. I don't gossip about myself. We usually gossip about other people. So a slanderer. What's a slanderer? In your own words. We can read what's up on the board, but in your own words, what is a slanderer?
So, legally, if you're found guilty of slander, it's because you've said something that diminishes the character of another person. You don't want to hang around with that person because did you know that this is in the past? Or, did you know that this is the type of person they are? And those things are just patently false statements. And you can actually be taken to court and found guilty of those things and end up paying damages or things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else? So when you dig down into the very root of the word gossip or talebearer, we see the idea of a seed picker, someone who actually goes around and just picks little pieces and parts that they want to share or plant somewhere else, if you will. That is definitely what gossiping is all about. So the Bible also uses the other 2 words, talebearer or a whisperer. Usually things that are whispered for reasons that other people shouldn't be hearing it. And talebearer is telling little stories about different people. So let's go into some of the damages. The damages that gossip causes. So it reveals secrets in Proverbs chapter 11, verse 13. We read there that whosoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. So if I was to say something to one of you all in here, say I had a sin, or I had something I'm really struggling with in my life. And I came to you and shared that with you in hopes to get some guidance on that. Is that okay for you to share it with somebody else?
Generally, no.
Yeah.
I mean, the only reason that I could think that it would be okay is, hey, you know, I know somebody else that's having that same problem. Would you like me to, you know, or I know someone that's overcome that. Would you like me to talk to them for you? And, you know, maybe they can give you some better advice. That's probably the only case
I agree. If I wanted everyone else to know, wouldn't I be telling them? Wouldn't I be asking everyone else for advice? So it kindles strife. In Proverbs chapter 26, verses 20 through 21, for a lack of wood, the fire goes out. And where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases. A charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a quarrelsome man for kindling strife. So how do some people view the words of a talebearer? Do you know a talebearer? Zibby?
Sometimes if you need something to get around, you know exactly who to tell.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It is. we maybe you do or don't know someone at work that is always in everybody else's business, that's always talking about everybody else. That is a gospeler. They are gathering those little pieces and parts of seeds to plant other places for the good.
Bets on how long it would take this individual to get something completely around the entire plant, and it would depend on what it was about. And so that a lot of people, before the cops start catching on to it, they cook up these things and tell them.
Did it cure him or her? Did it cure that person?
No.
Yeah. So let's turn to, just one verse. Proverbs chapter 26 and verse 2. We also read there that the words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down to the innermost parts of the belly. And then Proverbs 6, verses 16 through 19, we say there are 6 things that the Lord hates. We read these verses last week. There are 6 things the Lord hates. 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that deceives wicked plans, or devises wicked plans, and feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. So how does God view gossip? What's his attitude toward it? Yeah. Yeah. The one of the top 10 qualifiers, I guess, of really upsetting God. Be a gossip. He hates it. It separates friends. I'm going to turn to Proverbs chapter 16. A worthless man plots evil, and his speech is like a scorching fire. A dishonest man spreads strife, and a whisperer separates close friends. So how does this happen? How does a whisperer or a talebearer or a gossiper separate friends?
Back in the first week of the study, we talked about the progressive nature of sleep. And the fact that, well, you know, maybe you start telling a story and you realize maybe I shouldn't be saying this. But then the person's interested and they start digging for, you know, more information and more information and more information. And then the next thing you know, you completely eliminated, you know, this person that might have confided in you. And it's that, you know, we talk about sin being progressive and being entrapping. you know, all of these things when you think about sin, you know, you might just want to start out and say, hey, you know, I've got this great little piece of information I want to share. And then you completely shame that person you're talking to.
Anybody else have anything to add? Very good. Zippy?
Difference between man and wife. I've, say like, say early on, something happens, and you were asked not to say anything. This never happened. Then maybe somebody gets clued on so-and-so, knew about you, knew about this, didn't you? What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. So what do you do? What do you do in that situation?
You say, enough said. Go to the source. If you want to have information regarding that, yeah, enough said. And that's okay. You know, when you find yourself confronted with someone that's gossiping, it's okay to snuff it out right there. It's maybe not comfortable. It may be somewhat embarrassing, but it's all right. I don't need to hear this. It works. I do not need to hear this. It brings anger in Proverbs chapter 25, and then we'll scoot down to chapter 29. But in 25, verse 23, we read, a north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue, angry looks. And 29, verse 22, is a man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression. So how soon? He says, he draws this parallel here, that the north wind brings forth rain, and a backbiting tongue angry looks. How soon does that north wind bring rain? When we see the rain clouds, or we see the wind coming from the wrong direction, normally the wind comes from the kind of the southwest, heads across the state of Ohio, and always goes kind of to the northeast. When it turns around and heads back the other way, what kind of things do we see happen? And my dad used to say, the leaves are turned backwards. What's going to happen? It's going to rain. So he's kind of referring to that here as, when you see this change of wind, you know something that not good is going to happen. Well, so does the talebearer. When the talebearer starts passing this stuff around, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next week, but eventually it's going to come back around and cause this anger and cause this strife and this transgression. Doesn't happen immediately, not normally. The normal progression of a talebearer is not to go out and get a megaphone and blast it all over creation. It's going to other individual people and just letting that little bit go and pass through the crowd. Now, Dwayne?
I just wanted to bring up, one of the important things that I think we can get from this particularly is, I think before this we talked about, talking about a person, right? Well, did you know that this person has got caught up in this, or this person's got up in that? There's gossip that we can talk about that has nothing to do with an individual. Hey, did you know that they're going to cut the manpower by half? They're going to fire half the plant. You're not necessarily talking about an individual, but if you're the person that starts something like that, and then it doesn't happen, you can very well lose your job or something like that. Why are you spreading these sorts of rumors? Why are you gossiping about that? And I think, the other ones we talked about were more, an individual talking about another individual. But here, it could be, any number of other things. Just think about an agency or a group or an organization that, now you're starting to say, well, did you hear that, Trump's going to leave the White House? I don't know. make something up.
Are you trying to start rumors?
I mean, but you think about it, right? You think about these organizations and organizations. I think this is when people get in trouble with a lot of work. Is, well, I heard that next month they're laying off a third of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
It comes back and they figure out you were the one that started that.
And it does.
That's explaining.
Sometimes it can take a while to get back to the source, but it is possible to do. You're absolutely right. It happens at work quite a bit, and it is absolutely gossip. Okay, it shows one to be a fool in Proverbs chapter 17, verses 27 28. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. So the author asks this question, and I kind of question his questioning this way. He asked the question, how can a fool convince others he's wise? Based on the verse that we just read, everyone should be quiet, right? So we all come out looking wise. But how can a fool convince others that he's wise?
People stop saying foolish things.
Yeah. Be completely silent. And
The point of the proverb is there's damage that's caused by saying things that are either worthless things or untrue things or things that don't need to be said, or just think about what Dwayne said a minute ago. Maybe they are going to run further than plan off, but is that your place to say it and incite panic and what have you, or are we talking about those kind of things, or a person, or maybe there are things that are true that do they need to be said? Is there benefit in that? Is something that should be a man of a cool spirit? It says that.
If, this is hypothetical, a member says to you, I haven't seen so-and-so in quite a while. And that person you probably called them and asked them, we missed you, is everything okay? And they go into telling you we're having family problems, and some of them are really serious.
Sure.
We're having a hard time. So then another member asks you, well, have you seen so-and-so? I haven't seen the wrong one. And I said, well, they're having serious family problems. We could just pray for them. Should I have said, they're just having problems? Or, or say, I wondered about that myself and let it go.
sure. So
Situations like that, whether it's telling something that maybe they didn't want to say, they didn't tell you not to say anything, but I'm not sure what to do.
right, you don't know whether they confided in you personally because they know you on a more personal basis than they know a lot of other people. But that may be why. That may be why they confided in you. So is there, and I'm going to ask this question for everybody, is there maybe a better way for that to be approached when a question like that arises? And the question was, an individual comes to me and says, hey, or I go to somebody and say, hey, I haven't seen you in services for a while, and they confide in me and say, we're having real personal family problems, and it's just been, we haven't been there. Now, Mr. and Mrs. X comes up to me and says, have you seen so-and-so? Have you heard how things are? Have you heard what's going on? What do I say? Because I know some stuff now, right? Shirley?
Maybe when you're talking to them on the phone and they confide in you, you could say, well, is it okay for me to ask others to pray for you under this circumstance and let them know what you're going through? And then you would know whether they wanted you to say something. Otherwise, tell them you need to contact them yourself. And, You don't really want me to say.
Craig?
I think, a safe way to approach that and make sure that you're not gossiping, but you're helping, just goes along with what Jerome said, is you can tell somebody, yeah, I've talked to them, and I think they could really use some encouragement from you once you give them a call. Just, encourage, you always encourage people to go to the source of what it is, and then that person has the choice to tell somebody or not tell somebody, then what they choose to do, it's not, you're not involved in gossip.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate that and agree with that. It's good to direct that person to go to the source and be an encouragement. But sharing the other information, I'm not saying you would, but somebody could construe that as being gossip. Somebody could. And to avoid that, we would just, take that approach. Direct them, yeah, and they need encouragement. Seth?
So in that scenario, she has no evil intent whatsoever. In fact, she's trying to kind of help the person in question. It's still, are you saying partially because of how it could be construed, it's still classified as gossip?
Well, I would say that maybe is more information than the original person that said that to you wanted to be passed around to everybody. I don't know, we don't know the relationship that this person has with Ruby or myself. It may be someone that I talk to on a regular basis and they're perfectly comfortable saying something like that to me, but they may not want that to be given to anybody else.
But she still, she doesn't have any evil intent, so it doesn't have to have
Absolutely. I don't think it has to have evil intent.
gossip.
Yeah, I believe so. You're planting a seed. Now, so one of the problems with giving information like that to somebody else is, okay, raise your hand, please raise your hand, if you ever got in a big circle or got in a big line and somebody started at the front end of the line and said, I'm going to tell you a sentence and I want you to repeat it all the way down to the other end, and then the person at the end, I want them to tell me what that sentence was. So, it's good. So, yeah? Pretty much everybody's done that. That's the exercise. It's a very good exercise. What are the chances of what was said the first time coming out of the person's mouth at the end of the line?
I've never seen it.
Never seen it happen. So there's always this little, so to Seth's point, if Ruby tells me this situation because I'm asking her, and then I go and say, Seth, I know Seth knows that person. I should maybe go tell Seth. And I have no ill will, but I want Seth to maybe go talk to that person. And we're starting this circle of information going around that, it's safer just to say, Seth, they could use some encouragement. If they want to share that information, they can share that information. Yeah.
We might want to just think about too, that we don't want to confuse gossip with helping someone who's struggling or lost in sin. So, True. We can see, we're talking about information that someone has given, and, do we want to spread that around? Obviously, no, that's gossip, but, seeing someone who by their fruits you can see they're doing things that are sin, or that they're in sin, and, we have several scriptures that tell us that to help people that and snatch them out of the fire, or warn them, or rebuke them, depending on what the situation is. So what we're talking about doesn't mean that we don't recognize someone who needs help and go to them, but there's a difference between that and taking something they have said and spreading that around and they're asking. We're not totally sure.
You also could ask the person who's confiding in you at the time, would it be okay if I say, would you like people to pray for you if they ask me about your situation?
One more on this, and then we're moving on.
How much more effective
would it be, Craig's point, the points that have been made, if when someone comes to you and confides in you, if you talk to them and pray for them, and then someone else asks how they're doing, and you say, you know what, they could use some encouragement, why don't you talk to them? And if 10 people reach out to that person and talk and pray with that person as an individual, and they all do that on their own, how much more effective is it for that person than for one person to say something and then it spreads, and then they hear something later, to your point about somebody else said something, and now they're frustrated instead of encouraged and built up, which is what you want out of the entire thing.
Yeah, good point. So how do we overcome this sin of gossip? What do you think? Before I click this button again, what do you think? How do we overcome this sin of gossip?
Well, I think those questions that Craig put out to consider, those three questions, if you can remember to ask yourself that, that's probably pretty much going to cover it.
Yeah. If you remember to ask yourself that. So when we're asking ourselves that, what are we doing? We're imposing some self-control. Imposing some self-control, which is not always easy for us to do. So, to Craig's point, Craig had three questions to ask himself. The author has seven questions, I think. A little harder test, Craig. So, yeah, you're still work. So the first question is it true? Is this thing true? So, yeah. And I'm not saying if you passed one of these questions, it's okay to go repeat this information, all right? I think that the idea of the author here is to go down through all the questions, make sure you pass all the questions before you go on to the next. The next one is it going to build up or tear down? We've talked about that in some of our discussion so far. Is this really going to do what we intended for it to do? And sometimes we intend to help build up, but in that intent we don't consider everything and we accidentally tear down. So we need to be careful of that. Have I talked to them first? That's brought up a couple of different times. Have I gone to that source? And this is just one specific instance here, but have I gone to that source and ran this by them? Have I examined myself? This comes into play when we're going to go talk to somebody else. So, am I in a good position to even go talk to this person? And another good one is, why am I really wanting to do this? Why am I really wanting to relay this information to another person? And it takes a real hard self-examination to make sure you do that. So, and is that what I wouldn't want them to do to me or be done to me? In Matthew chapter 7 and 12, so whatsoever we wish that others would do to you, do also to them. For this is the law and the prophets. So let's bring that back. Okay, I'm going to ask you, Ruby. So if you told me a situation like that, like you were having family problems and you were having trouble getting services, would you want me to go tell other people that? And some people, that's okay. Not everyone's that way. some of the consequences, what are the results? Take a few minutes and look through some of these. In Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 13, whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. If I tell Kathy something, I know she's not going to tell anybody. I know that. I know that because I know Kathy. If I tell one of my friends on Facebook that posts like every day, 5 or 10 times a day at least, something that I don't want passed around, what are the chances of that staying where it should be? What are the chances? Do you guys know people like that? I mean, do you know the difference? Sometimes we think we do and we don't necessarily, but we should know the people we're talking to, whether they're gossipers or not. Not by testing them, Zippy. Not by throwing them curves. The heart of a righteous studieth to answer, but the mouth of the wicked poureth out evil things. And I can't help but think, if we do have a person at work that is of this nature, and pretty much everybody knows it. It's a shame. It's a real shame. And this person's been talked to about it, but the wicked just pours out, and you can just see it. You know it when he starts talking. And I literally have been one of those people that said, I don't want to hear another word. I'll see you later. It's tough. It's tough to do, but sometimes we have to do it. A froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separate the chief friends. We talked about that a little while ago. We don't necessarily mean to separate good friends, but sometimes good friends get separated because of this gossip. And even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise when he closes his lips and is deemed intelligent. We talked about that verse earlier as well. And whatever goes about slandering reveals secrets, therefore to not associate with such a babbler. Is that an easy task or a hard task? So is it possible for a person to be a real good secret bearer or a real good confidant, and then later on in life be a talebearer? Is that possible? Yeah, we all change, right? I'm not the same person that Tina married. I'm the same physical person. I'm not the same person mentally. I'm not the same person socially. I've changed. I hope I haven't changed to the worse. I hope I've changed to the better with her influence, but Craig?
Well, when you think about consequences, and this verse and a couple others we've talked about, maybe run that way. Sometimes when we think about gossip, we think about the person who is spreading it or saying it. And certainly there's a large part of the responsibility there. Something you've mentioned a couple times. I can be a part of gossip by listening. And so knowing the results of them, and just verses like this don't associate with a simple that I have a responsibility as well to stop and say, just like you've said, no, I don't need to hear this. I'm not going to do that. That may get the attention of someone who's engaging in it too, to think about what was I doing? Well, right. Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, I think we pay heed to what James had to write. And for James, the 26th verse. If anyone thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue, that deceives his heart, this person religious is vain. It's worthless. Bridle your tongue, as James says.
Absolutely. Proverbs chapter 25 and 23. It reads, the north wind brings forth rain, and the babbling tongue, angry looks, and we talked about that and how sometimes that doesn't happen immediately, but eventually the rain comes. And for the lack of wood, the fire goes out. If we don't give people things to gossip about, they can't gossip. So how do these self-reflecting questions help us in this quest to overcome gossip?
Sometimes gossip is unintentional, right? I can think about, let's just hypothetically say a marriage study, right? Where, it's a bunch of men and we're getting together and we're studying about our marriage. And, someone's saying, well, I've struggled with this. And another man says, well, my wife and I dealt with that same situation and this is how we overcame it. And you're trying to help to give them insight and help to give them, some sort of guidance. But then somebody else goes, hey, did you know that Dwayne and his wife are struggling with this or have struggled with that in the past? And then it's, you're sharing something to try to build somebody up, And I think sometimes we just need to realize that, even when I go to studies where fathers are talking about their children, one of the things that I thought about this is maybe I shouldn't necessarily associate a child's name with this anecdote or this story or this thing that I'm talking about, because eventually that child's going to grow up to be an adult, and people are going to start forming opinions about that child. And it's not that I'm trying to tear them down, it's not that I'm trying to hurt them. I'm trying to help others know that we've had a similar experience. And I just thought about that, wow, that could be really harmful. If somebody heard that and didn't think about the context in which I was saying it, and they're just deciding that they're going to take that information that I said in a group study and run with it and tell somebody else. So, I don't know, it's just one of those things, like sometimes it's not intentional, but as you mentioned, right, the seed planter, someone that's taking that bit of information and saying, well, this is a juicy bit of information that I can now, share with somebody else.
Yeah, and I had written that down. So that morsel. Why do we, as a human race, take that tasty, juicy morsel and think we have to share it with other people?
Like attention. So if we're the one sharing it, then the attention of the people they're looking at me, because I'm the one that I'm in control. I have power over that situation.
Yeah.
Also, ultimately, it makes you look better on carrying somebody else.
That plays a part. Nathan?
I think sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, that we're trying to help somebody, or warn somebody of something, and there may be causes and times for that, but I think sometimes we maybe overanalyze and think we're doing the right thing, and really it's spreading wrong stuff or stuff that doesn't need to be known.
Yeah. So we're out of time. I have one question. No hands. I'll raise my hand. How many of us have gossiped and maybe not even realized it was happening? I think we're all, we all fall into that mix. So it is. You got to be careful. Thank you for all the interaction in class and comments. Appreciate it. Next week is fear. Don't be afraid to come to class.